Today's Midday Kentucky cooking segment brought to you by Creative Kitchen and Bath, where you will always cook in style.
Welcome back to Midday Kentucky. Chef Allison Davis here in the Wild Time Kitchen back at home, and I'm feeling like my old self, and I'm making one of my favorite things, and that is homemade buttermilk biscuits. So if you are from Kentucky or from the South, you know everybody's grandmother has their own special biscuit, their own special recipe. So before you get too judgmental, just bear with me. This is a good recipe, it's easy, and there's really nothing quite like a homemade biscuit on Saturday morning with brunch, or just with a little bit of honey butter, which is what we're going to put on this one. So I hope that you enjoy this for many, many, many brunches to come. All right, first we're going to talk a little bit about flour, because not all-purpose flours are made the same. So I like to use King Arthur or a nice unbleached flour for biscuits. I've used some flours, you know, that are just very like run-of-the-mill, and when the biscuits bake up, they are kind of a bit grainy. So I think it's really important that you get a high-quality flour when you're making biscuits, because honestly, that's the main ingredient that goes into a biscuit. So, you know, spend that little extra money on a really good quality flour. All right, we are using all-purpose flour, not a self-rising. So I'm going to go ahead and start measuring this out. We're going to start with 2½ cups of our all-purpose flour. Just kind of pat it in there. Again, my measurements are not crucial. You can double, triple this recipe, but just 2½ cups. And I know I've got a black apron on, and it's inevitable that I'm going to have flour everywhere. It never fails. I'll wear white, and I'll get chocolate all over me, and I'll wear black, and I'll get flour everywhere. It just never fails. All right, so we got 2½ cups of flour. Then we're going to add our leaveners, okay? So our leaveners for our biscuits is a combination of baking powder, which we have about 1½ tablespoons of baking powder, and then a teaspoon of baking soda. All right, a little bit of salt is going to help flavor our biscuit. So I really don't measure that. I just kind of do a nice little pinch of salt and an equal pinch of sugar into our flour. All right, so that's our dry ingredients, very simple. Then the next step, and the key with a good biscuit, is cutting in cold butter, okay? I use butter. I like butter a lot. I'm using a scale just to make sure my measurement's right, which we're going with about ½ cup, which is equivalent to kind of like 1 stick, I believe. And so when we cut in the butter, you could use a pastry cutter, you could use a knife. I tend to think sometimes your hands are your best tools, but we really just want to break this butter up. And we're going to break this up to where it resembles kind of like a little bit of cornmeal. Like you want it to be very mealy, where the butter is all worked in. So we have cut in our butter, and now we're going to add in our buttermilk. Again, buttermilk I think is another key ingredient when it comes to a really good biscuit. We're going in with a cup of buttermilk, and this is just going to give it that little bit of acidity. It's going to help work with the baking soda to help the biscuit to rise a little bit as well. And then I just think it gives it such a rich flavor, you know, better than just whole milk or cream. All right, so if you notice what I'm doing here, I'm very gently just kind of incorporating the flour and the buttermilk just to get a nice dough. We're going to roll this out. The key with a great biscuit is you do not want to overmix. You just want it to come together. Pat this baby out and then let it, we're going to cut it with a biscuit cutter and then get this in the oven, and you will see the result. All right, I don't know if you can see how gorgeous these are. You certainly, I wish you could smell how wonderful they are. All right, our biscuits have been cooking at about 400 degrees, and I really more or less am looking to see that they're nice and golden brown. We're gonna finish these up with a little bit of just warm melted butter over the top. And then it's a personal preference, but you could also, and what I'm going to do with these is drizzle a little bit of fresh honey over it. And again, there's so many different things you can do with this, from making little sandwiches to biscuits and gravy to having a biscuit bar with an assortment of jams and jellies. But this recipe is a winner, and I hope that you all enjoy this every Saturday morning from now on. All right, well, you guys know exactly where to find this recipe. You can go to middaykentucky.com/recipes. I'm Chef Allison Davis. You're watching Midday Kentucky. We'll be right back after this short break.